Recruiters and talent acquisition leaders who are taking a look at their hiring processes and hoping to tighten things up, make it more efficient, or maybe get better outcomes, more quality candidates, more diverse candidates. This discussion is for you. I'm Anna Peters. I'm with College Recruiter, where we believe that all students and grads deserve a great career. And today I'm joined by two experts who have insight in this regard. I am joined by Bruce Soltys, who is the head of talent acquisition and sourcing strategies at Travelers, and Janine Truitt, who is the Chief Innovations Officer at Talent Think Innovations. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So we're going to dive right in. We are focusing our conversation around technology tools and what is available out there to help recruiters and talent acquisition leaders in their hiring processes. So first, let's think about some, and I want to touch on both low and high technology tools, whatever occurs to you, to speed up the process. So especially large employers who have thousands, hundreds or thousands of applicants, what are some technology tools out there to speed up the processing of those candidates, or shortlist candidates maybe a little more quickly?
I think we've seen a lot of technological improvement at the ATS level, so within the applicant tracking systems on the front end, capturing information from candidates that the system can sort of parse in a way that will stack rank based on attributes, experience, and so forth. That helps when a recruiter has, hundreds and sometimes thousands of applicants. How can that technology help that was gleaned from an application perspective rank those candidates in a way that'll help the recruiter go through that candidate list? Obviously, sometimes you can't go through every single candidate when you have thousands upon thousands, especially in some higher volume jobs. So I think we've seen a lot of the ATS solutions, regardless of vendor, really try to incorporate that pre-screening, pre-qualification aspect into the candidate view.
I think I agree with what Bruce said. One of the things that I've enjoyed seeing in the recruitment tech space over the past few years is the vendors looking at ease of use for the recruiters in the sense of, being able to take bulk actions against candidates as you're dealing with it, because there was a time, maybe 10 or so years ago where you actually had to click through and then take an action on each applicant. And that is extremely time consuming, particularly when you have high volume recruitment, which I've always had my entire career. It can be hours and hours of a recruiter's time trying to get through, say, 500 candidates. So I love seeing this movement towards drag and drop screens and bulk actions. I would say for anybody that is looking to acquire a system anytime in the near future, these are just some specific things you may want to look at in terms of your system, because it'll save a ton of time.
So the recruiter's experience obviously matters. They have so much on their plate. They need to get through a lot of candidates. But as ATSs get better at that side, are they losing the candidate experience? What tools are out there? What do ATSs incorporate to improve the candidate experience?
Yeah, I think that's one of the aspects we're always concerned with is drop off from a candidate application perspective, right? You see people start applications, and because of their length or complexity, et cetera, you want to mitigate that drop off. So I think the parsing technology has certainly gotten better. I can remember back to, the early 2000s when they started, building out this resume parsing technology, and where it would take aspects of your resume and essentially complete the application for you. And you would see, during some of those user acceptance testing periods, you would see what the technology would pull. But obviously, like all technology, it's gotten a lot more, advanced in that sense. So as much as companies can incorporate that certainly takes the onus off of the candidate. I think it comes back to collecting what information you need up front to make that first informed decision. Mobile friendly certainly is something a lot of companies have gone to already. We at Travelers made that transition within the last year because of the presence of mobile devices and mobile applications, especially at the collegiate level. The ability for folks to access cloud documents, I think, is certainly important as well. not everyone has copies of their resume handy or any of the other documents that are needed. So between mobile apply and, the advent of Dropbox and G drives over the past, what I'd say, 2 to 3 years, I think we've really seen that gain in popularity. It feels like it's much longer than that, but if you think back, it really isn't that long ago where those aspects weren't available to folks.
It's hard to think back pre-mobile domination.
So I think the candidate experience, for a good portion of the vendors that are out there, a lot of them have started to make available ways that you can embed like video on your website and make it a lot more user-friendly. Like years ago, it was basically just like this very basic template overlay that looked similar to their website. Now they've gotten a little bit more savvy and they're able to kind of customize it a little bit more to what the customer wants in terms of how they want that customer experience to come across. So that's a good thing. Another thing that kind of occurred to me was file types. How many file types to allow for the candidate to upload. So when we were implementing a system in one of my projects, there was a situation with one of the vendors where they only allowed like one type of doc and maybe like a TXT, not realizing that a lot of people are moving towards PDF now, and that may be helpful for them to accept a PDF or a simple basic Word text document or DocX. So I think like the systems have gotten also a little bit more savvy at that spectrum too, because you can have somebody that has a file type that you might not accept, and you're missing out on a candidate because your system doesn't recognize it.
Yeah.
So it's like a really small thing that people don't really think about, but it's kind of important because you'll lose people. And I think the other piece too, to what Bruce was saying about drop-off is, I think it's important for recruitment teams and talent acquisition teams to know, like, how long does it take for you to do an application on the site? I can't tell you how many recruitment teams don't have metrics around that. And it's so important. You should actually be going on your site and trying the application process for yourself and seeing like where there's issues for you in the process, and then going back and working with your in-house HRIS team or your IT team to make sure you fix those bugs. And obviously it's technology. You can't exactly solve for every single issue that's going to happen, but at least you can have some resolution for some basic issues and maybe have like an FAQ. Like I've done that with my teams, creating an FAQ on the site for the candidate in case you run into these issues, here's how you can solve for it. But then also having a real-time resolution for how they fix things. So whether that's a chat box that pops up and says, hey, chat with this person if you're having issues with your application, or some sort of like contact box where they can send in some issue that they have and screenshot something. I mean, I just think like those are some common things that need to be happening now.
And I would, back to your point about taking the application or applying for your own job, even better, ask someone who's not in the HR department, so someone in a different department, to apply for that job and tell you what they really think about the process. So someone who hasn't been inside of it.
And that's something we did at the end of our intern program this year. We did focus groups with all of our interns and actually talked to them about not just the onboarding process and their experience here, but the actual application process. That's an audience that is willing to share their thoughts openly, honestly, very tech savvy, and got some real great feedback from an end user perspective, and folks that had just lived the application process just a short while ago. So tapping into those new hires, as part of your new hire orientations, soliciting that feedback is really a useful aspect to tie back into with your review of the application process with your tech teams.
Yeah, good idea. I want to ask you one more question, and then we'll sign off and come back for part 2 so people can join us another time when they're ready for it. I want to talk about analytics or other tracking abilities. So what are some basic ways that do you suggest that recruiters should be using analytics or tracking their metrics?
So, I mean, for me, I was always interested in, the people that I hire, how are they faring within the organization? So, for instance, if I hire them today, are we retaining them 1 year? Are we retaining them 9 months? Are we retaining them 2 years? I think that's an important metric for recruiters to look at beyond the typical, time to fill and those kinds of things. I think we all know time to fill is kind of arbitrary in the sense that you can get a requisition today and you can be, in the midst of trying to fill that. And there's so many things that go awry in that process that you don't really ever get to a number that's useful for anything. But I do think the one thing that recruiters could be called on is the quality of the people they're bringing into the organization. So presumably, if you are using the right referral sources to get the right people and you're doing all the things that you need to get the best people, then they should be people we should be able to retain. However, we don't have a tie to what happens to them when they go to the department. So I think what that also illuminates is there an issue in the department that we need to be looking at? And then that's a call on HR or whomever to kind of go back and work with those teams on how we better retain people.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, that's kind of a basic thing. The referral source, also tracking the referral sources, the quality of that, I think is super important. I've seen a lot of teams use referral sources that they've just been using for a lot of years. They don't really check it to see that it's actually working in any ROI. Mm-hmm. Right. And so what you end up doing is you end up throwing away a lot of budget just using the referral sources you've always used versus always kind of looking at it maybe on a quarterly basis, annual basis, whatever you do to see, okay, who are we getting in from it and how is it benefiting us as an organization? And for me, those two right there, I think are some basic places that recruiters can start from to kind of get their hands into the analytic game.
And to draw out, I think you were saying this in a way to make sure that discussion about the management, the supervisors, how are they playing a part? Because if you have a rock star employee who comes in and their performance right away is they hit the ground running, they do really well, they get good performance reviews, but they don't stay very long. Something else is happening. So only looking at that quality, the retention piece, only looking at that and then putting that on the recruiters and the sourcers is not, you're not looking at the whole story.
Correct. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, if we get a little bit more further down the pipeline, I love to see where recruiters can start to take those metrics and start to forecast and model for things coming down the pike. So traditionally, people use talent acquisition and recruitment as kind of like a just-in-time division. I just have this to fill now. Can you fill it like yesterday?
Yeah.
But that's not really where the power of recruitment and talent acquisition lies. I see the power of it in, hey, we know that we have an expansion project a year or 2 years out. What are you seeing in the market? And how likely is it that we're going to be able to staff whatever this expansion is based on your knowledge of the market? That's the true power of what talent acquisition does. We're not there yet, but that's where I'd like to see us get in the coming years, because it takes us out of this kind of, just-in-time knee-jerk reaction mode to being somewhat predictive and prescriptive in a sense.
And that's where those metrics help, is being able to dive into your data and predict. Bruce, any last thoughts about tracking metrics?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and totally agree with everything that Janine just said, I think we're part of this, shift and evolution from tracking data until the talent's been acquired. And I think companies have gotten pretty good at that. And I think now morphing into sort of that phase 2, as Janine mentioned, post-acquisition metrics and tracking that will help influence your initial acquisition strategy. So I think, totally agree with that concept, and we see that from an industry perspective happening. I think the other, metric aspect that I would encourage folks to think about, especially those that are listening to this that manage recruiters and manage staff of recruiters. We talk about time to fill being a metric, and a lot of times folks will look at the workload of their recruiters. Okay, you have 30 recs, you have 20 recs, you have 40 recs, et cetera. But the complexity of those jobs, something we try to look at here at Travelers is, somebody that has 20 recs, that's part of a claim center hiring class in the same location, that's different than somebody who has 20 senior actuarial recs because of the complexity of that search and things like that. So bringing that into your metric equation when you're looking at your recruiters' workloads, I think is a really important caveat. Certainly different companies will weight and measure things a bit differently depending upon the functions, but having a cognizance about that from a metric standpoint, that'll certainly help influence, how you balance workloads on your teams.
Great. Yep, good insight. All right, we're going to sign off for now, but we will come back and continue the conversation. Thank you for being with us.
Great. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.